not just for clearing members, it's for all trading members as well. This is the second one. We had the first one on the 3rd of November. So the session objective is in preparation for the ITaC Go Live, which is JSE conducting the training. The primary objective of the session is to provide an overview of the drivers and benefits of the ITaC project, explain the key changes to the existing derivative clearing process, describe new services and functionality that will be introduced with ITaC, and then also to provide a view of remaining activities in the lead up to Go Live, which we are looking at Q1 2018. So this is the agenda for today. I will be talking on the first 2 points, and I'll hand over to Sina and Wilhelm, and then Gabby will finish it off for us today. Okay. I take it that everybody here knows what the ITaC project is. If you don't, then we have a big problem. So the ITaC project program overview. The JSE currently provides trading and clearing settlement service for the equity derivative, currency derivative, interest rate and commodity derivatives. So the ITaC project is to move the derivatives off the current trading and clearing platforms and move it onto the integrated trading and clearing platform. It's a multi-year program. It's to migrate the derivative and bond markets to the MIT Millennium Trading Platform, and then migrate all markets to a new Cinnober real-time clearing platform. The phased delivery approach is equity, derivative and currencies, which we are busy testing now, and which the dress rehearsal was last weekend, and the next one coming up the following weekend. And then phase 2 is busy being planned. Just before I continue, if you guys got a question, we've got a webinar, so we just wait for the mic, please. Is it right, Sandra? Yep. Okay. So post Project 1 and prior to Project 2 go live, this is what it will look like. So on RTC, you'll have your equity derivatives and currency derivatives. And then still on the old platforms, you'll have commodity derivatives, the interest rate derivatives, and then the cash bonds. And as you can see, the IRC is being split because FX is moving over to RTC. RTC stands for real-time clearing. The aim of the JSE aims to achieve its integrated clearing vision through ITaC. The vision is based on the 3 pillars, as you can see. It's centralized and real-time risk management. It's efficient asset utilization, and then consolidated clearing operations. The JSE selected Cinnober as a partner for the development of the new multi-asset clearing platform, proven high-performance real-time clearing solution. Cinnober, they're based in Sweden. We're using the RTC clearing system. So just to give you guys a view on the centralized and real-time risk management, as of today, margin exposure you only get at the end of the day. So margin calculations, and you only get it at the end of the day. In the new RTC world, there's a real-time margin exposure monitoring, and then also the optimization and consolidation of margin calculations, meaning that as the markets come on, there's only one end of day, there's one margin report, so everything gets consolidated, integrated. The key benefits is more efficient margin calculation with increased flexibility to offset. Margin calculated centrally across all markets, and then also to provide, sorry, I just want to grab a water, provide to the client real-time risk managing during the day, meaning that you won't have to wait till end of day to get your margin exposure. As your position and prices update, you'll be able to monitor your risk intraday. This is just the client capital efficiency. In the current world, we only take ZAR cash for the collateral exposure. In the new world, you'll be able to put up ZAR, you'll be able to put up securities, and also we're busy working on getting foreign cash. So meaning that your margin can be covered in any, not just cash, but also securities that could be pledged to JSE Clear. meaning that the acceptance of non-cash collateral will allow freeing up of cash and providing relief clients in the phase of rising capital requirements with the Basel III stuff coming in. So you will free up cash. This is just to show you that business and IT operational efficiency. In the current world, you got ECS, which is the equity market clearing, and then you got Nucleus for EDM and IRC. So it's all separate. In the new world, in the RTC world, equities, derivatives, and bond markets the clearing will all be done in the real-time clearing system. So the key benefits, people, consolidating business and IT operations team, and cross-skilling across all markets. Processes, automated and optimized business processes for maximum efficiency. And then systems, a single consolidated IT system provided by an industry-leading software provider. So we just go through the changes to the current derivatives clearing processes. Just an overview of the key changes and new services. So this is our Christmas tree. So trade entry will change because we're using the Millennium IT trading engine. Pre-trade risk monitoring will be changed. And just to guys, the ones marked in red, we will be going through in detail on the rest of the slide pack. So as I mentioned earlier, intraday risk monitoring, which we will be covering later on. Margin methodology will be modified, and then we also have intention to move to EastVar, which will give you a better margin offset because we put the whole portfolio and work out what the margin is. The JSA, which is to be signed by all market participants. This is just a service agreement to cover you more if there's downtime and problems. Data agreements is for you to sign the data agreements. Front ends, this is with JSE will no longer be giving out front ends. Reference data, there's one single system for reference data, but which we'll cover later on. Deal management, the take a turn functionality is no longer there. So what that means is that when you do a trade and you assign it on to your counterparty, you will actually have the ability to put in your commission in the commission slot. So new commissions is a new functionality. End of day processes, I've spoke about it earlier. It's a single end of day run across all markets. And then there's a two-step clearing balancing process where we will first balance on initial margin and variation margin. And then the second balance will be booking fees and the commissions. There's some BDA integration with the Securities Collateral we spoke about earlier. Interfaces, connectivity and bandwidth, and then obviously the JSE rules will also change because we're introducing securities and FX collateral. Just the daily clearing life cycle. We'll just go over that quickly. So this is just to show you guys the new world where start of day, you'll do your data downloads, your member client and account data, instrument data, risk data, previous night's closing prices, and then obviously the members and branches that's in the market. During the day, there will be trade, deal, and position updates. You'll be able to do deal management, commissions, what I spoke about earlier. You'll be able to apply your commissions on your deal managed trades. Price updates. We've got the new service where we will be doing our valuation system. We'll be sending the RTC real-time clearing system prices between 15 and half an hour. So for the intraday risk monitoring, you'll be able to view your portfolio as the prices fluctuate in the market. So you can see if you're actually breaching your limits or not. Intraday reference updates, that's where you'll be able to load user-created instruments on the M Millennium front end, which is the any days and the option strikes. Publishing of the rates is still the same, the JIBARs on a daily basis. And then obviously the early valuations that get done at 3 o'clock for the EDM and currencies. At the end of the day, there will be final deal management, commission management. We'll be doing the end of day margin calculation, the clearing member balancing, the new securities collateral, the billing, and then the generation of the payment instructions. And as always, at ad hoc, there will be transfers or corporate actions. And then the following day is just the processing of the PCH payment. Guys, just shout if there's any questions. This is just key times and activities. I'm not going to go through it because it's basically just covering the timeline that I showed earlier. And then this is just to give you guys a high-level view of what the new systems will look like. So there's a trading member. You will go through his front end. You will be connected to the trading MIT front end or trading system. Those trades will feed through to the real-time clearing system. Once we've balanced in the evening, we will do the securities collateral with conjunction with the straight collateral management system, the Clearstream system. And then obviously the pledging of the securities back. And then once FX and once the FX collateral is enabled, then the FX and Zcash settlements will go through the Swift Alliance, the PCH payment. So a clearing member will connect. You'll connect to the MIT front end to the on behalf of trades, and you'll connect to the RTC to do deal management and balance at the end of the night. We also will then be updating the BDA system as per normal with the derivatives file on a daily basis, and also the securities that's being pledged. The BDA will be updated just so clients can see what's been pledged. This is just a bit more detail. So this is the order and trade management gateway. It's trading is native, post-trade is fixed, drop copy is fixed, and the equity trading is fixed. Deal management, it's the EMAPI messages. Post-trade risk monitoring, collateral management, margins, and clearing and settlement. Reference data is all markets. It's the IDP where you will get all your reference data from. And then market data gateways is where you will get all your market data, where you will have to sign the JSE data agreement. This is just a high-level overview of what the real-time clearing system looks like. So as we spoke earlier, we will receive trades. We'll be doing deal management. Your positions will update as the trade and deal management hit. Risk monitoring is the intraday risk monitoring and also the end-of-day margin balancing. Collateral management is the securities collateral that we spoke about earlier, where you can pledge securities instead of putting up cash. The normal settlement that we do on a daily basis. Default management, in case of a client default or trading member default, we've got the system capabilities of handling it. And the non-market facing functions is valuation, stress testing, back testing, etc. And then obviously the reference data that we receive from our JSE internal system, which is called MDS, which is the master data system. These are the touch points on the outside. There's the MIT, clearing member, trading members. There's the IDP portal we spoke about earlier. JSE internal systems, which we need data from, like I said, MDS, our valuation system, our billing system, and in settlement banks, that's touch point where we will settle, and in clearing member clients, CSTPs for the straight collateral, which is the new functionality that we're introducing. And with that, I will hand over to Hasina. Okay, Hasina.
Good morning, everybody. Please let me know if you have any questions as I go through the slides. So over here on the first slide, we have, sorry, I think I skipped one already. Okay. All right, so this is the first slide that just kind of tells you which accounts or which position accounts each entity can create. So some of them are system generated, but you will now see that for the trading member, he will get a house main, a house sub, a house suspense, and a client suspense. For a trading member branch, he has a house main, house sub, house suspense, and client suspense. And all our clients, whether they are branch clients or trading member clients, they either have a client main or a client sub. The trading member can request additional client sub accounts. So the request goes through to the JSE like it does today, and the JSE will allow sub accounts for the client, and from then on, the trading member can then go and request more client sub accounts. So the ones that are, oh, sorry, I think I keep pressing the wrong. Yeah. There. So the ones that are system generated is the house main and the house suspense and the client suspense, but you can request additional client suspense accounts. Similarly, the branch position accounts is house main, house suspense, and client suspense, and then the house sub is the one that you can generate or request more of. Right button. Okay. So on this slide, we're trying to show how the risk is rolled up in terms of the risk nodes. So all the blocks in blue are the risk nodes, and the lowest level risk nodes is the TM1 house, the client, the branch client, and then the TM client. So the risk for each client will be rolled up to his risk node as well as for the branch client. And then for the TM house, you'll notice that all the branch position accounts also fall under the TM house account or the TM house risk node, and the risk will all be rolled up to the TM house account. From that point onwards, the risk for the TM house, all the TM's branch clients and the TM's clients will all roll up to the TM's risk node, and then each of the clearing members, trading members' risk will then roll up to the clearing members' risk node. You will also see that there are collateral accounts that are generated for ZAR, securities, and currency on the lower level risk nodes. So at any point in time, you will be able to see exactly what collateral has been pledged for each of those, for each of these. All right. Then there's segregation of collateral. So I think I've just explained that. And then in this slide, we are trying to show you that there are two different risk trees created if you have a trading member clearing through two different clearing members. So on this risk tree, you can see that the market that's being cleared is equity derivatives. And on this risk tree, the market that's being cleared is currency derivatives. But you'll notice that the trading member is the same, is exactly the same. You'll also notice that the client is exactly the same. So logically, there would be different position accounts created for this risk tree and the same logical accounts created within that risk tree so that the margin can be calculated based on who the clearing member is for each market. Okay. So for each risk tree that we have, the client will need to be linked to the correct clearing member. On RTC, we only have one instance of that client, but it can be cloned for the different markets that that client wants to be to participate in. Okay. On this slide, I think what you will find familiar is the TM codes that you have. I think they're 4 characters in length. In the new world, you're going to have a 3 character long alpha code. So what you see here is ABC Securities has a 3-letter alpha code, whether it's clearing through, and in this instance, it's clearing through the same clearing member. But you have DEF Securities that is clearing equity derivatives through CM2 and currency derivatives through CM3, but they have the same trading member alpha code. So for ITaC, we are going to be consolidating the alpha codes. So it shows nicely in this screen where currently you have ABCE that has a margin call for currencies, so for equity derivatives, and a separate margin call for currency derivatives. But in the ITaC world, you'll see it's now called ABC, and they have one single margin amount across both those markets. Okay. So here, this is all about consolidation of markets and trading member codes. So we're going to have a new code which is called the production identifier code. It's made up of the alpha code, which is the first 3 characters, and then we have 3 X's after that, and then another 2 characters that signify whether the production identifier is for the clearing member or trading member. So the CC will either be CM or it will be TM, and then the last 3 characters are 001. If any of the first 8 characters are going to be duplicated, then the last 3 characters are incremented. So the next one will be 002, and that's just to make it all unique. Any questions so far? Okay, so the other significant difference in ITaC is the way in which we're going to identify new contracts. So there's 3 ways in which we can uniquely identify contracts, and that's using the contract code. And you'll see examples of those contract codes down here. You'll see that they are very explicit. From just looking at the contract code, you can tell whether it's a dividend neutral, whether it's an any day, whether it's a call, or whether it's a put, what the strike price is, and whether it's a Quanto. Even the strike on the Quanto says that it's a strike on a Quanto. So the contract codes are very, very explicit, and they go up to a maximum of 50 in length. We also have ISINs, which is also very new to the ITaC world, both for the equity derivatives and the currency derivatives. And we also have a unique ID, which is, I think, 9 characters in length, and it's numeric. So there are 3 different ways in which you can identify an instrument. All right, I think now we are moving to contract codes. So right on Nucleus currently you have a 4 long code, and you would recognize something like AGLQ or AGLS. And what's going to happen in the new world is that each contract that we take onto ITaC will be mapped to its existing BDA code. So, and this mapping will be provided to you guys. Obviously, there's new instruments added all the time. So even before the go live weekend, we will provide you with an updated list of this mapping. So after we go live with ITaC, any new instruments that are created won't have the old system code anymore. Okay. All right, then we have, so for ITaC, we might end up having new instrument types, or they would be called different names compared to the current world. So this mapping will be provided as well. In the new world, the ORMI will have its correct name. So instead of the ORMI contract being called ORMI, it will now say ALSI Mini. So that's another difference that you need to cater for. There's also many instruments, or you guys know them as can-dos, but in the new world they will be called structured products. And currently there's any days and quantos that fall under the can-do structure or classification, but in the new world they would now be seen as mainstream products. So they will no longer have the can-do or structured product classification. Right. If I missed anything. Okay, so dividend neutrals, I think this is a big change. On Neutron today, or Nucleus, you guys have the dividend neutral contract, which is a virtual contract. And if you trade the dividend neutral contract, you'll end up with positions in the single stock future physical, as well as the single stock, as well as in the dividend future contract. So in the ITaC world, we're doing away with the dividend future contract. So if you trade the dividend neutral, you will end up with a position in the dividend neutral contract, and then you will get a journal entry in the dividend neutral contract. Does that make sense? Okay. Then there's lots of changes with corporate action processing. We are going to be automating the whole corporate action updates that need to be made. So whether it's reference data updates or it's position updates, it's all going to be automated. So new instruments would be created if that corporate action requires new instruments to be created. The old instruments would be suspended on LDT date automatically, and then terminated on X date. So there's no manual intervention. And then the corporate action function is actually moving more towards the equity corporate actions team. So it's moving out of ClearOps. And then market notices won't be sent out as they are currently. They will just be published on the JSE website. And then the corporate actions on international equities will be sourced from Thomson Reuters. All right, so now we get to user-created instruments. So you can see there's a list of instrument types that you will be allowed to create new expiries on. You will find all the instruments that you can create instruments on in the trading reference data CSV files. The futures can only be created if existing future contracts already exist. And you can't create an expiry further than the furthest expiry that exists. So it always has to be an expiry within the furthest expiry date. Instruments created intraday will be disseminated via the Mitch Market data gateways. And there's an error here. These client trading reference data files will be updated intraday as well. So you will get an update of the new instruments with the embellished data, things like ISINs, which you won't get on the Mitch data gateway, but you will definitely get the complete set of data required on the instrument on the trading reference data files. And that's me. I'll hand over to Willem.
Intraday risk monitoring, which is a new service. So in our world today, we've got the end of day process which calculates your margins, and we balance on those. In the new world, with what we're trying to do is, as trading happens, we want to give you a more up-to-date margin number. Similarly with our variation margin, as you trade and as prices are changing, we will publish a new variation margin for you. And typically, I think the current plan is that by probably about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll have your final VM number if there's no deal management. In the past, we probably had to wait until about 6:30, 6:45 to get the final VM number. And that's really a push from our side to make some of these numbers available a bit earlier before we actually into CM Balancing 1, so that we're trying to reduce any scope for errors. As we've said, we'll update the risk information throughout the day. The type of information we are publishing is our initial margin, additional margin, variation margin, even collateral values, if you are pledging securities and those are the value of the securities change, or if at the straight side new securities have been pledged. All of those information will come through. And as part of what we send out on the message is the indicative call, which is basically just if we had to call you at that moment for your margin, if you had to settle your margin at that stage, what would your call be? So that's basically taking all of your margin requirements minus the value of your collateral. Obviously, we call it indicative just to emphasize the fact that we're still going to, when we get to end of day, our initial margin, which is based on JSpan, we're still going to recalculate the risk arrays. So we're still using the previous night's risk arrays, and depending on how much your price change and volatility is moved, that indicative call will be updated. But it should give you a very good sense of your call. And it's obviously there for looking at your liquidity requirements. We also aggregate the numbers up from a client level up to the trading and clearing member level. As you trade, these numbers get updated. And like I've mentioned, the VM is also updated with your collateral. We do set a threshold. This is basically just a value so that we can give you a sense of whether you are far away from what you had the previous day. And again, that number we looked at, which is the indicative call, this is the way we'll calculate it, and then we compare it against the threshold. And that's just an alert on your side to say it's now above that threshold. That threshold, we will set an initial value, and then the trading clearing member can set a more conservative one, and the trading member can set one that's even more conservative. So this is the type of information that we, from a risk perspective, that we are publishing. I mean, I've actually forgotten to tell you, we also, things like as positions change during the day, we'll send you the new positions. As a trade hits the system, we'll publish that trade for you. If we are updating prices in the system, those prices get updated to you. So this is really just the additional from a risk perspective. And you see at a client level, what you would do, you'll see all of your breakdown of your initial margin and how that gets calculated. If you do a new trade, these numbers will update. Your VM will update the collateral value there, and then your indicative call. And then you can also see it at whether you want to look at the trading or clearing member level. Just to give you a bit more of a visual feel for what we'll show and how things will actually work. Just to give you a bit of context, so here we've got the JSE, and here's the clearing system. There's your trading members and clearing members doing activities. And this is a depiction of the type of information we'll disseminate. So at this stage, there's nothing for you to see. Then the clearing member loads a client. So suddenly it comes to RTC, and RTC publishes that information out to you so you can see your clients. If we'll add reference data to the whole system, you'll get the reference data. We'll add instrument prices. And now we start trading. And now suddenly your positions get updated. So we get the trades in, the JSE will give you on the account position event, we'll say here's your positions, we'll give you your trades, and then the one that we've been looking at now is the risk node event with all of the risk numbers. And as you get all of this, I mean that view we spoke about gets populated. Here you can see your positions, and there's the risk numbers associated with it. As you trade more, again your positions get updated, and these numbers change in conjunction. Then we could have that prices change, and that typically the main one that will be affected there would be your VM. Are there any questions on this? Hasina?
Okay, so I think Andre mentioned earlier that there's no longer going to be a take-a-turn functionality. Take-a-turn functionality is going to be replaced with commissions. So what that means now is that trading members would need to capture commissions for transactions concluded. And the primary role of the JSE will be to make sure that the settlement of the net commission accounts happens across the clearing members. So this will all happen at end of day. We will kind of aggregate all the commissions across the trading members' accounts to the clearing member, and then we will make sure that the commission flows the way it needs to, just like we would for variation margin. So it's a similar kind of concept. So commissions data is entered into the clearing system and will be provided back to the trading member and clearing members. And the reason why you need this information is for you guys to facilitate your cash collections and payments from your trading members and your clients. And then it also facilitates your reporting and reconciliations and your invoicing. So your trading member, your front ends will need to have capabilities to for the commission entries to be submitted to the JSE clearing system, and thus the values that you submit need to include the VAT amount. The other information to be included in the commission entries, and which is mandatory, is the market and the recipient of that. So when we speak about recipient, it's actually the trading member that's being charged the commission. So you have the initiator and you have the recipient. So if you're going through the presentation, just think of it like that. The recipient is not the trading member that's receiving the commission. He is actually the trading member that's paying the commission. The other fields that we have that are optional on the message will allow you to maybe reference the trade that you're booking the commission against, or it could be used for any other model that you are using to manage your commissions. So the trading members will have to monitor their commissions actively, because you would receive, so the initiating member will calculate commissions and capture it. The receiving trading member will need to verify that that commission calculation is correct. If it's incorrect, the receiving trading member would need to reject it. If the initiating trading member figures out that there is a fault in the calculation, they can also cancel it. So if it's not cancelled or rejected, it will go through, it will be processed at end of day. So it's important that somebody monitors this the whole time. The only time that it can be cancelled is if you pick it up before the JSE generates settlement instructions. And so you have up until the end of day to go and either cancel that commission or to reject it. If we've passed or we've gotten into the end of day state, then you would have to call the JSE and ask the JSE to cancel it. But the JSE can only do it up until the step where we go and generate the settlement instructions. If we haven't done that, then the next day you would have to just book a delta commission to correct it. So this gives you an idea of who all the stakeholders are. I think I've already spoke to who they are. So you can see the initiating trading member needs to capture the commission. The recipient trading member needs to monitor the commissions and reject it if he finds that it's incorrect. The clearing members, I think they've got the biggest job in that they need to reconcile the daily commissions, make sure that the cash collection and payment between its own trading members and clients happen. And the JSE clearing just facilitates just the movement of all this money after having made all that information available to you guys. Any questions on commissions? All right, so I think this slide kind of sums up everything that, it summarizes everything that you need to know about commissions. So it's the commission management functions in terms of capturing, rejecting, canceling on a daily basis, and then downloading all this information that you would need to make these calls, and then knowing what the processing times are. So knowing that commissions, you only have up until end of day to make sure that all the commissions are processed. And that if you've missed it, then you're going to have to only charge the commission the next day. And then end of day balancing and settlement all happens on the current day for settlement the next day. And then commission reporting and invoicing, that's up to you guys to facilitate on your side. I think that's the last slide.
Okay, again, Securities Collateral is a new function. There's quite a lot of processes involved here. I think the way we've designed it, we focused very much on getting it very much automated. So if you see these processes, they look quite complicated, but 90% of it is all automated. So the big thing for us is just to make sure that systems are up and that things are up and running, because then from an operational point of view, once things are in place, it's actually not, it works quite well. Just a bit of background. At the moment, how it works is that the JSE will run its end of day, will calculate your initial margin requirement, and then you'll have to settle that in ZAR, which typically happens the next day. Now, after the credit crisis, and as Andre mentioned before, some of the Basel III changes that came out of that, the funding cost that you have to put up with when you are balancing, when you are putting down collateral, ZAR collateral, is becoming higher and higher. So the push really here is to enable you to pledge something else, which is either foreign currency or securities, which you might have lying around, and in that case, alleviate some of the ZAR pressure on you. Just in terms of how this is going to be phased in, basically, when we go live with this ITaC project in February next year, we'll enable the functionality of collateral. Initially, we'll allow government bonds, and that will be on the derivative and currency derivative markets, which will be the new two markets on ITaC. Shortly thereafter, once things have settled down, we'll incorporate top 40 equities. And eventually, when the other markets come onto the ITaC platform as well, you will be able to offset your margin there. And then eventually, we'll also take FX as a form of collateral on all of these, on all of the exposures that you get out of trading on all of these markets. This overview slide is quite nice. It just highlights some of the points that you need to be aware of. It's like just a high level. It's not my slide, but I quite like it. The people who are affected, who can post, is your trading members on their proprietary accounts, so your TM house, and then obviously the clients. Maybe I can just mention that when we talk about pledging collateral, securities, how it's going to be slightly different to the current the way things work today, because today the JSE calls the clearing member, and the clearing member calls the trading member, and the trading member calls the clients. With securities collateral, the client pledges directly to the JSE, and then the JSE will just call for the net amount from his clearing member. So that's just something to be aware of. The clearing members can also pledge collateral, but that would be as on the default fund, not as part of your normal exposures. We allow you to cover your initial margin and additional margin, and then, like I said, the clearing member can cover his default fund contributions. We take liquid government bonds and top 40 equities, and then at a later stage we look at FX. The items we use to do a bit of risk management on the collateral is, firstly, there's a minimum ZAR percentage, and this allows us to force you not to put everything down in ZAR, or not to put everything down in securities rather. So firstly, your VM will always have to be in ZAR, but then depending on the risk management feel of the day, I think that we can either increase or decrease the amount of your exposure that you can cover in your securities. There will obviously be some haircuts on the securities. So if you have to cover 100 Rand of initial margin, you might have to put up 110 Rand in the value of the security. And then we also have some concentration limits that forces you to not, you can only put down a certain amount of a certain ISIN, and then you have to use something else. So we're talking about between 40 and 20% of your initial margin that has to be in ZAR. And the haircuts at this stage we're thinking about is 10% on govies and 15% on your equities. So for you to pledge securities, you have to open an SDA account at Straight, and then a pledge will be done from there, not a session. Like I mentioned, the collateral is pledged directly to the JSE from that SDA account. It doesn't go through the clearing member or the trading member, even though they are involved in the process. And then we need commits from the CSTP on all of those pledges. There's definite rules and changes that need to be made to the JSE's rules and updates to agreements with clients. And then we've got two processes. We've got an end of day process, in which where we send out the latest initial margin requirement. Then we also have an intraday process where we allow for changes in top-ups. If the price of the security change, we allow you to withdraw security. Those are two main processes. This slide is basically telling us is that for securities to work, the first thing that needs to happen is that the client has to open a segregated depository account, a SDA, via his CSTP at Straight, the CSD. And I think that's what they show there. So only once that has happened, and that might take several weeks, with legals that need and documents that need to be signed, then the client can actually form part of the daily collateral process, which might have already been running. And so what will happen is, on a daily basis, the JSE will calculate your initial margin and confirm it with the clearing member. Once that's done, we'll send that exposure to Straight. What Straight will do is it uses, I've got a very nice word for it here, the Tri-Party Securities Collateral Service, so which is basically their Clearstream, which is their service provider that takes all this information and then optimizes what the collateral pledge should be. That pledge goes to the CSTP to confirm it, and once it's confirmed, it comes back to the JSE. That's the first time that we now see what has actually been pledged. The JSE would then offset your margin requirement with what has been pledged, and that's the amount that you'll need to settle. So just some of the key processes. Your end of day process, that's the process where we recalculate your full exposure amount and your initial margin, and we'll send that to Straight. So we only send it to Straight once a day. It doesn't get sent to them continuously, even though on the Straight side, what they would do, you could manage how you are covering your collateral. You could manage that throughout the day and make changes there. Then, like we said, we've got the intraday rebalancing process. The main item here that I want to highlight is if you have pledged the security that you need for something else, and you don't have other securities. If you had other securities, you can just put them in your SDA, and then you can remove that security that you've got committed somewhere else. That's the easy part. However, if you don't have other securities, you have to what we call as a withdrawal process, which is that you first have to pay in cash via your clearing member, and then we'll release it. That's part of the process we do intraday. And like I said, throughout the day, you can change the makeup of your securities at Straight. Corporate actions, just to mention there that obviously corporate actions affect pledged securities, and depending on what type of corporate action it is, you might need to pledge something else. I think there's a slide on that. And then also default management is also affected by the securities that's been pledged. In today's world, if you default, we've got your full margin in ZAR, and it's a relatively simple process. In the new world, if you default, those securities that you've pledged to the JSE will first be liquidated, and then the proceeds of the liquidation then goes to the clearing member. Is that right? Just a quick overview of the end of day process. During the day, you've got your changes in positions and prices and volatilities. Like I said, end of day, we calculate your initial margin again for the first time. Then we take which part of that do we allow to be covered in securities. We send that to Straight, and then Straight does the calculation via Clearstream to see, based on this latest exposure, and the latest securities in the SDA, what do they want to pledge. That information comes back to the JSE, where we will then determine what is the net amount that you have to settle in ZAR, and then those payments get settled. So it's a very high-level view. It just gives you the main functions that need to happen. Exception. So these slides just talk about if we are missing certain times, because a lot of what we're talking about here needs to happen at the end of day, and there's quite a bit of time pressure to finish all of these processes in time, because people want to go home and systems are shutting down. We are looking at maybe changing this, but the principle still remains that we might be under a bit of time pressure. And what happens if we are struggling to balance with a certain clearing member, or a system is somewhere down? So I think in essence what we're saying is issues need to be resolved by a predetermined time. If they are, we'll then just do our collateral process a bit later. But if they're not resolved by that time, what we'll do, we'll take whatever collateral has been pledged previously, and we'll just continue with that. Maybe just to mention that the pledge that we get from Straight, if we send the next day, we send them a different margin requirement, the previous pledge still stands. They just pledged the delta. So a pledge doesn't get removed. It stays there until it's explicitly told to be removed. This is just more on that. I'm going to go into this. Then quickly looking at our intraday process. So intraday, what could happen is the value of collateral could change. And there's a lot of activity that could happen on your SDA via Straight. So the client would have access to his Straight front end, and he could perform certain functions there. Things that could happen is he could top up his securities. For instance, if the value of your securities have gone up, then what Straight would automatically do is they would say the security is now worth more. You don't need to pledge as many, and it will release some of those securities. I've mentioned the withdrawal process, which is, so the client wants to get rid of the security, but it's pledged to the JSE. And because this amount could be quite significant, we don't want you to just remove it and then we wait for the cash the next day, because that pledge that you've made could have been built up over several months, and it could be quite a significant amount. So what we do in this case is we first ask, if you want to withdraw those securities, we go to your clearing member and we ask him, you want to withdraw a certain amount of securities, is the clearing member happy to fund us that money at the moment, intraday? If that money then settles, we then go back to the Straight and we said, right, we've received the money from the clearing member. We'll obviously have to get it from the client first, and then we'll release the securities. Corporate actions, we've mentioned them. So the two main corporate actions is either a corporate action that what we call the instrument stays eligible. So that's typically where there's a dividend payment. It's still a corporate action on the instrument, but from a collateral point of view, we're not really too concerned about that. We'll still have it pledged to us. Typically, if you think about a dividend payment, the biggest impact would be on the price of the security, but we would have the variability in that price covered by the haircut. The more significant corporate action would be obviously if something like a termination of an instrument. From a collateral point of view, that item becomes ineligible at some point. So the process on our side would be to first put out a market notice and let you know that at a certain date, the security will no longer be accepted as collateral. And then in the days leading up to the corporate event, corporate action, we would increase the haircut on that security, which would cause the system to pledge less and less of that security and substitute it with something else that's more efficient. And eventually, we'll just go a day or two before the X date, we'll just remove that security from our eligibility list, and you'll have to then just stock fund it in cash if you don't have anything else. For any client to actually pledge collateral, there's a bit of a process that he needs to go through, and I mentioned this could take a few weeks. Firstly, the client contacts either his trading or his clearing member, and he tells them that he wants to do this, and there might be some the members might decide whether they want to accept his collateral or not, because for some of them they won't do that. Then through the CSDP, you create a SDA account at Straight, complete your securities collateral. There's a form that you need to fill in, and then receive confirmation from Straight that everything has been loaded and that you're ready now. And then from a client's point of view, now you have to put in securities into this new SDA. And once all of that's done, what will happen automatically is that those securities will start being pledged to the JSE, because on the JSE we'll also activate you. End of that process. Thank you. Any questions on collateral? Thanks.
Okay, so with us introducing securities collateral, you can then just imagine that the end of day process is going to change, because now we're going to have to take the securities collateral into account as well. So when we go live in next year, we will not go live with securities collateral immediately. I think there was a call from the market to wait a while till things stabilize, and then to introduce securities collateral a bit later. But I'm showing you the process now as it is with securities collateral. So firstly, we're going to have a single end of day run across all derivative markets. I think we've made this point earlier. A margin breakdown report will be available to facilitate reconciliations. So you will get a daily account summary report like you do today, except now it will be via a message. So that daily account summary report will be at a detailed level on a risk note, that lowest risk note level that I showed you. And then you would get additional reports at a trading member level as well as a clearing member level. The end of day timings will be revised as a result of the single end of day run and the introduction of collateral processes. So you guys would need to consider all the implications that it means to your business and your operations in terms of having a single end of day run. So this is what it's going to look like in the transition phase. So you've got your clearing member up there, and you would now need two front ends. One that links the clearing member to the equity derivatives and currency derivatives on RTC, and then another front end where interest rate will still be on Neutron and commodity derivatives also on Neutron. So what we're trying to point out here is that you would have to balance on RTC for these two markets on Neutron for interest rate, and on Neutron on commodity derivatives. And then you've got your IDP for all your reference data files, and then BDA as well. And then you've got the straight collateral management system, where the client needs to go and update his collateral, and what he puts into his SDA account and what he wants to withdraw all needs to happen on the straight collateral management system. So what is going to happen is that once everyone's balanced, all the settlement amounts from the Neutron systems will feed into the RTC system, and then we would generate one settlement instruction for all the markets, for all the derivative markets, that is, and that settlement amount would feed through to SWIFT, and from SWIFT gateway into the settlement bank, and that's how we would get settlement the next day. So I think it's going to be very automated. There'll be no more capturing of these PCH payments on Samos, I think it is, the next day. Everything will be done, or everything will be facilitated during end of day, and I'm guessing that the settlement bank will see those payments the next morning. Any questions? All right, so I think the key activities as part of end of day is CM balancing 1, securities collateral process, and then getting to CM balancing 2, where you're going to get your risk fees, your booking fees, and your commission amounts, and then your publication of the final daily account summaries. So CM balancing 1, I think, is very similar to how you have it today, where you're going to have margins, dividend payments, and CFD funding amounts. So I think I've already mentioned that you would have separate end-of-day runs for interest rate and commodity derivatives. Daily cash settlements at the clearing member level will still be netted across all derivative markets. Post the end-of-day balancing process, corporate actions and client transfers are processed if applicable. So you'll see that in the next slide. Okay, so let's start over here. So this is where RTC end of day starts at 6:30, but we're expecting to have most of the end of day prices by 5:35. And that's where Vilhela mentioned to you that you can already get a sense of what your variation margin is going to be. So when we get into end of day, we would only get the delta prices. So prices that we didn't receive in this run, we would get it as the late end of day price run. And then RTC will start kicking off a whole lot of calculations to figure out variation margin, funding interest. I think dividend payments also gets done here. And then when we get to CM balancing 1, all those values are available for clearing members to start balancing to. So we're expecting that to happen around 6:45, and then we're giving the clearing members to balance within 15 minutes. And we're hoping that it's going to be far less than 15 minutes because all of this is going to be automated. Nobody's going to be calling the clearing members anymore. The messages should tell clearing members exactly what those values are, and they can pick it up and they can do their end of day, balance back to our figures, send us a message to say that they balance. All right. If they don't balance, in that same message, they can tell us that they're not balancing, in which case then this 15-minute period would be extended, in which case everything after that would also be pushed out. So securities collateral, if everything goes well, should start at 7 o'clock. This is when the exposures are sent through to RTC. Not to RTC, to straight, and then the pledges are made using the straight collateral management system. Once that process has come through, we're going to expect a statement from Straight that tells us exactly how much is being pledged in terms of collateral. And once we know that, we can include the booking fees and the risk fees and the commissions, and then work out what is the net payment instruction in ZAR. Okay. So at that point, so when we work out the net payment instruction for the equity derivatives and the currency derivative market, we would then get the settlement instruction from the IRD and commodity derivative markets and include it in that payment instruction. So by 7:46, if everything goes well, we should know what needs to be paid the next day. And then you'll see there's a big time lag between 7:46 and 11 p.m. when transfers and corporate actions take effect. And the reason for that is we're making it, or we kind of allowing a bigger window in which any issues can be reported. So we're hoping that most issues would be identified at CM balancing 1 or CM balancing 2. But for any reason that the issue isn't identified and it's picked up before 11 p.m., then it's still possible for us to do a rerun. If the issue is picked up after 11 p.m., then we wouldn't fix any issues with a rerun. We would then have manual intervention the next day to correct any issues. Okay. Any questions on this end of day process? Okay. All right, so then I think this brings us to all the exception scenarios. There's a lot of appendices attached to this presentation which goes into it in much detail, but the slides that I'm going to talk through are very high level, so I think it will be worthwhile going through those other files as well. The exception scenarios are broadly categorized as delays in the end of day process where things aren't balancing or there's technical issues and therefore things are not going according to plan, or there are issues identified, in which case we need to correct margins or we need to correct settlement amounts. So issues identified after end-of-day debalancing, which have typically in the past resulted in consideration of an end-of-day run. So those are the things that we've listed here. We've done a rerun in the past where there's an incorrect MTM price, incorrect IM parameter, contract loaded with incorrect size, or a clearing member does not balance to JC on evening of T. Okay, but there's still a further criteria that's used to determine whether or not a rerun will be done. So, it's dependent on the time on T+1 that the issue is identified. So in ITaC world, if it happens after 11, then definitely we wouldn't do a rerun. Value of the discrepancy in VM or IM. So if it's a small variation margin discrepancy or an IM discrepancy, then a call could be made that there isn't a rerun and the number of clients impacted. If it's limited to a very small set of clients that are impacted, then the decision might be made not to do a rerun. Okay, then other issues that impact end-of-day results, but which would not typically result in a rerun, are trades captured at an incorrect price, incorrect dividend payments, incorrect fees, incorrect interest on margin. And the new one for ITaC is commissions, which you guys didn't have previously. So if the reason for these things to be addressed, it boils down to incorrect settlements with associated funding costs and incorrect client reporting. So whatever mitigations that we've put in place, it's focused on fixing those two problems first and foremost. So the overall approach for managing exceptions, the JSE tried to put a lot of preventative measures in place to avoid any of the issues that you guys currently experience. And I think the biggest preventative measure that's been put in place is around automating valuations. So if we look at the data historically, the majority of reruns that occurred because of manual processes in the valuation space. So going forward, if it's automated, it's less likely that those issues should recur. If you go through the appendix, there's about 10 preventative measures, and I'm going to try and recall the ones I can right now. The other one that we've got in place is we've got alerts. So if there's a price that's been deleted, or it's very far from what it should be, or it's a duplicate, then there's alerts raised, and the system can be configured to even stop processing depending on what the alert is. The other one is the intraday margins that are available throughout the day in terms of VM and IM, as well as the indicative core. So that can be monitored throughout the day to see if something looks amiss. We've got the prices that are published earlier at 5:35, so it goes out to a broad audience. So anybody listening to the market data gateways on MIT or the post-trade clearing system will be able to pick up any discrepancies in the price at 5:35, which is actually an hour before we even start our end-of-day process. Other things that we've got in place are things like exception reports in VM and IM, so the JSE internally will also be able to look at any funny numbers and try and investigate them further and see if it's related to an incorrect price. We've also got our reference data system that now defaults the contract size for instrument type, so it's not a manual capture of the contract size. And we've got a lot of different areas that need to approve a new instrument being loaded into the MDS system before it hits the trading engine. I think I'm missing a couple, but you will find them in the slides in the appendix. Then processes in place to manage exception scenarios. So depending on when it is identified, in both cases, processes aim to address the key adverse impacts of such issues. So as I said, incorrect settlements, main issue to solve, and incorrect client reporting. And then obviously the JSE would consider fair compensation in the event that 1 and 2 above fail and funding costs are incurred by the clearing members due to JSE errors. And issues will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So there's going to be a lot of processes documented for exceptions, because there's quite a few permutations of things that could go wrong. So I think what we're trying to work towards is knowing in advance, if a certain situation arises, how it will be handled, instead of on that night trying to figure out what should we do next. So I think we're going to have a lot of processes in place that kind of tell you the criteria of what needs to happen in certain exception scenarios. Yeah, so one of the 3 approaches that will be followed. Firstly, I think the way to fix anything most correctly would be to do the end-of-day rerun, but that's it. That's only possible up until 11 p.m. Then we have a 6-step process, and the six-step process is a manual process that happens outside the clearing system. And in that 6-step process, what we would do is we would calculate the margins outside RTC. We would then issue the correct price or contract size or IM parameter that was incorrect during the first end of day to the clearing member. Then the clearing member can use the correct value to do an end of day, and then we would reconcile the value that they get with the value that we get that we've calculated outside of RTC. And if we're happy with those figures, then we would do adjustments to the settlement, and then after that, the clearing members can issue new client reports. And then the 6th step is where at end of day, we actually have to take that discrepancy into account so that we reconcile at end of day. So just remember, if there's a discrepancy on T, that discrepancy will come through on T+1 end of day as well. Okay, and then you've got the third resolution method, which is the correction of settlement instructions. And this is where we've got the booking fee wrong, or we've got a risk fee wrong. It's not a huge balancing issue. It's a soft balancing issue. Oh, that's all I have. Any questions? Okay, sorry, and Gabby's going to take over for the remaining activities leading up to go live.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so we have 6 business days left until our second market-facing dress rehearsal, which is taking place on the 25th of November. So that's next week, Saturday. We then have 61 business days until go live, which is on the 19th of February. Okay, so just for completeness, I've added into the slide pack what we've already been through and what we've done. Our software conformance has been done, and we've also done 2 software provider dress rehearsals. We've completed a voluntary clearing member testing, and then mandatory clearing member testing is going to be done in 2 phases. Phase 1, which is in the process of being kicked off. We are currently making sure that all clearing members can connect to the environment, and once that has been done, we will start the scripted testing, and that runs from the 13th of November to the 15th of December. Phase 2 will start on the 8th of January until the 9th of February 2018. As you've already heard here, collateral management will be tested. However, it will not go live on the 19th of February. We are still negotiating the go live date for collateral management, and we will advise everyone in due course. Okay. In terms of what's coming up, what's left for 2017, activities left for 2017, as I've already mentioned, we did our first mandatory market-facing dress rehearsal on the 11th of November. And what is going out today is an invite for the 23rd of November to provide the market with feedback on that dress rehearsal. And then we have our second mandatory market-facing dress rehearsal that's taking place next weekend. In terms of what's coming up in 2018, on the 1st of February is the final enablement, is the cutoff date for all final enablement amendments. The 8th of February is final live connectivity testing that can be done. 17th of February will be our third market-facing dress rehearsal. That is over the go live weekend, and then 19th of February will be the go live. If we have to use the contingency date, then we will use the 24th of March as our third market-facing dress rehearsal and the 26th of March as the contingency go-live date. This is basically just a summary of exactly what I've just told you, so I'm not going to go through that. And then also what I've added to this, and you can look at this afterwards because we will be sending the presentation out, is a list of documentation that can be found on the ITaC webpage that's useful and that you can read through if you have any questions and you are looking for certain specific information. Any questions? No? Good crowd. Thank you very much. think that's it. I think we're done. Thanks everyone for coming.